Okay, good morning. Welcome to Planning for Sustainable Youth Programming this morning, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with sharing our screen. So today's training is a collaboration between T-Task and Prevention Partnership, the Governor's Prevention Partnership, GPP. Today, we will be planning on discussing learning objectives that include youth engagement as an evidence-based strategy in prevention, how to incorporate and expand sustainable youth engagement into your planning and implementation plans, assessing resources and readiness of your communities or your coalition to engage youth, learning ways to fundraise and look at your resources for youth activities, and receive some tools to assist in planning for youth engagement. We'd like to start today for those who are maybe new to the field or joining us for one of your first times. Many of you may know this, but what exactly do we mean when we talk about youth engagement? So what we refer to in that sense is the intentional and meaningful participation of youth in all parts of a campaign or program, from ideation and design to implementation and evaluation. This happens by creating an environment where youth voices are heard without stigma or judgment. And meaningful youth engagement integrates the experiences and ideas of young people into program design while also building on their skills and strengths. And I think the most important part of this definition that we will dive into later today in this presentation are the words intentional and meaningful participation. Meaning is a thoughtful process. It is incorporated into your design of all things that you do versus an afterthought or a tag on to something that you've already planned without incorporating youth voice or their participation in the planning phrases. Why is youth engagement important? Well, to increase community knowledge and awareness around substance use and behavioral health that are impacting youth. They lend a unique perspective of what's happening in their world and in their frameworks of which they go to school, live, their neighborhoods, their community. So, able to share a lot of knowledge and awareness about what's happening, decreasing stigma and reducing barriers to access of care, providing skill development and nurturing leadership among our young people, right? The legacy that we want to build as prevention professionals, build the leadership and skills of those that are coming up behind us in whatever field they may be doing, in whatever sector they may end up as a part of, to keep adults abreast of current and emerging trends that are impacting and important to youth. Utilize an evidence-based strategy to decrease substance misuse and increase overall health and well-being of youth and community, which is always our overarching goal in prevention, and to ensure that we're selecting evidence-based strategies that are rooted in research and proven to be impactful and effective on the goals that you set for your community or coalition. A little bit of theory, not too much, just one slide in terms of some models around youth engagement. Here we're looking at two different models, youth as resources and the social development model. And youth as resources aims to engage youth in positive alternatives to the behaviors traditionally prioritized by prevention programs, shifts the framing youth as being or having problems that need fixing to framing youth, families, and communities as having strengths, assets, right, to develop, nurture, and enhance. Prevention efforts should be focused on environmental rather than individual change and strategies, and provide youth with alternatives that consist of a nurturing context and opportunities to participate meaningful. Social development model demonstrates the impact of peer groups on behavior, positing that stable membership in a pro-social group of peers can positively influence an adolescent. This means providing spaces for peer groups, maybe your youth committees, maybe activities that are going on in school, different clubs. But really, the point is to engage youth in positive interactions with their peers in a place that results in pro social behaviors, just as membership in an antisocial group might result in antisocial behavior, looking to look at this from a strength based and an asset based model. Membership requires bonding with a group which is defined as youth having a role, having skills to fulfill that role, and receiving positive signals for fulfilling that role. What are some examples of youth engagement strategies? And some of these you might well be familiar with, working with youth peer advocates, right? Some of your coalitions and those who belong to the Youth Advisory Board with GPP as an example. Usually youth peer advocates are paid. They can be unpaid too, but part-time professionals who support coalition coordinators and really act as that liaison between the program, its youth participants, and community partners. Youth adult partnership is where you are looking to bring both youth and adults together in partnership to learn the requisite skills to meet their shared goals. So the other night we did this for the Youth Advisory Board. There were adults, there were some youth. So that's an example where we're bringing the two sectors together to learn together, converse, and learn from one another. Youth leadership within the formal coalition. So looking at your structures of your organization, how can they be scaffolded to support full involvement of youth, which we're going to go into a little bit, while youth develop their skills? So bringing them up that chain and down that line of collaboration and cooperation with our youth. Youth councils or youth coalitions, creating those may act as a subcommittee within the coalition and offer excellent leadership development opportunities. So really this is about providing them opportunities within the structure of your organization where they fit, how they're going to be blended as part of your planning and as part of your structures of your organizations. Informal youth engagement, things that we do out in the community as prevention professionals all the time, strategies such as having them be at events, participating in outreach, maybe they're recruiting, maybe they're working with younger students and bringing them up into the prevention field with them, providing nurturing spaces and safe spaces for them where they can spend their time, and also feel free to share their guidance and insight. So this is one model. It's called the Youth Engagement Ladder. And I really want to focus on the right-hand side of this slide. You can read, the content when you have a little bit more time. But if you look at this ladder, what we're really trying to do is avoid the bottom two tiers and kind of move things up the ladder. So the Youth Engagement Ladder really visualizes a spectrum of youth engagement practices that can be taken separately, but are best viewed as a progressive structure, which youth ascend through active participation and interest in leadership opportunity. So remember, our key words here today are meaningful participation, and adolescents are highly motivated by peer relationships and social status, making leadership opportunities an excellent context for meaningful participation. So we're going to go on to the next slide, which kind of breaks down this ladder a little bit to give you some ideas that might fit within. Then this is always an opportunity. We've done this before at TTAS, this training as an evidence-based strategy. This is always, I think, a really neat tool to be able to bring to a coalition meeting or a subcommittee meeting and or even your youth committee meetings and talk about where do you think we fit with our youth right now? Use it almost as an assessment tool. What are some ideas that you might be able to generate moving through this progressive structure? But to give you some ideas, we've got organizing and governing where youth are on their own or with adults serving as coalition or committee co-chairs. They've really been put into a leadership position within the coalition, and they actually have decision-making authority. So that's really the top tier of what we're looking for, where they are fully embedded in those opportunities within your organization or coalition. Youth-initiated leadership, youth are designing and implementing youth committees or larger coalition prevention initiatives. And we give you some examples here on what that might look like, such as creating their own PSAs, their social media posts. Youth are determining which key survey data they think is really important for you to drive some of your programming. Youth-initiated partnerships where you're collaborating with youth from another coalition or community organization. So maybe there's a youth council or statewide council, such as the Youth Advisory Board, where GPP brings together youth and advisors from across the state. That would be an example. And you can go through all of these. And at the bottom of the ladder rungs, you see things like decoration or tokenism. And this is where, we want to try to avoid, where you're just having one or two youth serving on a coalition, but they're not really getting any skill development. They're not participating in any training. They're not offered any leadership opportunities, or just bringing youth out when you might have an event and they're just standing as a part of a tabling event. And those are great opportunities too, but we don't want to just be stuck at that level. So giving them more meaningful participation opportunities for their voices and insight to be heard. And the last thing I'm going to talk about today in terms of the strategy itself is really the big picture here is to take some time to assess where you are, right? To look at where your youth engagement readiness really lives. This is another item that can be printed out and used as you look to answer some questions, whether you're at the beginning of thinking about how you might start to incorporate youth, or if you're already working with youth and might be looking for other opportunities for them to engage in. But the big takeaway here is utilizing a framework for key insights about your stakeholders' current capacity to work with youth, how a youth engagement initiative might take shape, or how a current initiative that you're already doing might be enhanced or strengthened. So just ask some simple questions like, in what activities will youth participate? And it gives you several ideas there. How or which youth will be participating? How are you going to be recruiting? Are you going to be using existing youth? Are you looking for new participants, etc.? How many would you like to have? How many do you think is a good number that you have capacity for to supervise and really provide those opportunities for? Is a good question. Who's going to be supporting them, right? What role are they going to play? And one of the most important questions I think on this assessment is, are the adults actually ready to engage with youth? Right? Not only from a safety and security and a guardrail and making sure we're providing those safe spaces for them, but also, are they open to hearing what youth might say, especially if it differs what from someone might think or believe is the right thing to do. So really taking stock and taking some time to reflect on how ready are the adults to be working with youth in these capacities. And then just preparing your youth as well and providing those training opportunities so they feel like they understand what your goals are and what your objectives are, and that they can participate in that meaningfully. Oop. And with that, I'm going to turn it over now. Unless there's any questions, you can always feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat. Happy to stop along the way with that. But our next segment is going to be turned over to Wendy Mill from GPP. Go ahead, Wendy.
Thank you, Jen. I'm going to talk, as you can see, a little bit about the fundraising cycle. And this is diving into developing and building those sustainable fundraising partnerships that you may have in your communities. So you can see there's 6 steps, and we're going to go through each one. Next slide, Jen. There we go. And the first step is really such an important step to consider. It's really articulating your why. Before we can even go and talk to our partners, we need to have a clear understanding of why we're raising funds, who we are as an organization. So let's take a moment before we even go out to articulate our clear sense of purpose and our campaign's why. Why are these funds important? We want specifics about the program or your project. Clearly define your goals and objectives. Be ready to talk about those. Have an elevator speech ready to initiate that conversation. And that would include your costs, your budgets, and how you're going to spend those dollars. And consider storytelling. Youth are a great resource in this when they can be a part of the storytelling, and how this, perhaps if it's you're raising funds for a conference, how has that conference benefited the youth in the past? How have the materials from that conference been used to propel your program? Consider that. Consider gathering photos and quotes or testimonials, graphics, anything you have that can support your rationale for needing these funds to go forward. So that would be step 1. Once you have all this together, you're going to move on to step 2. There we go. And then once you have your clearly identified why, who else aligns with that? Is it your Rotary? Would it be your Chamber of Commerce? Is it your school system? Is it another entity within your community? Is it a neighboring community that may also share this same goals, these same objectives, and it may identify with your why? They may have one that aligns very closely with that. So you're going to be looking for these organizations that align with your goals, and learn about them. Do your own research. What is their giving history? What are their financial resources? What areas are they already involved that really demonstrate their connection to your goals? What are their interests? And what are the potential giving methods? Is it possibly meeting space that you're looking for? Is that their area of partnering with you? Is it financial? Is it volunteering adult supervisors? Is it volunteering mentors? What are the potential giving methods that that this organization may have that will align with your goals. And then we can look at number 3. How do you reach out to them? Take this information that you have and first then verify that. Connect with this potential partner. And I highly recommend that the first connection you have with them is not an ask for a donation. It is not an ask for funding. It's really confirming your values are indeed aligned. You're listening, you're talking, you're valuing where they're coming from. You're looking at potential shared resources, your articles or stories about the topics that are important to them. You're inviting them to your activities and or going to their activities. So it's a shared opportunity at this time to involve them in your social networks and reaching out to theirs. So it's really initiating that relationship before we even get into the sharing of resources. So that would be our step 3. And then we move on to step 4. And you're ready to make the ask. You've already identified your why. You've identified those who are aligned with your why. You've confirmed that their whys truly are aligned with yours. And then you can find those shared goals in which you can move forward together. Consider the organization and what would the best method of contact be? Is that an email? Is it a face-to-face meeting? Could it be a virtual meeting with a group of people? If it's something that is across the state, it might be easier to do it virtually. Is it a phone call? Is it a direct mail? Really consider your organization and how do they communicate and what is the best way to share your information. It may be, in all likelihood, a combination of all of these methods. So it could be initiating with one and following up with another. Be prepared, really important, be prepared to walk your donor through the giving process. So have your process set up and ready. If it's a financial contribution, how would they be doing it? How would they be giving funds to your organization? Is your fiduciary partner lined up? And we'll be talking a little bit more about your fiduciary responsibilities later. If it is a shared space that you're looking for, what specifically is it? What are the dates of that? What do you need in that space? What kinds of capacities are you looking for in that space? So be prepared with details when you do have your ask, when you're making your ask. Have those details ready. And then we move to step 5. Assuming, and of course they're going to want to partner with you because you're an awesome partner. Of course they're going to want to partner with you. And once that happens, never ever underestimate the power of a good thank you. And that thank you can take all forms. Regardless of the size of the donation, you will always want to find a way to thank your donors. It could be a letter, it could be a phone call, an in-person meeting, it could be a letter to the editor in a paper. It could be a small ad that you've taken out in your local paper. It could be, again, a combination of these methods depending upon the organization and depending upon your donor. But it is really important that we follow up and respond with our thank yous. We're developing that relationship, and that includes gratitude. So we've done that. They've provided their support. We've given our thank yous, and we want to keep them then engaged. So you're going to create your plan to foster and build this relationship. We're not looking at a one and done. This is a sustainable partnership that you're looking for from these organizations or this individual. So you're looking for ongoing phone calls. What is your plan? Personal visits. When you're looking at events, continue to extend that invitation, whether or not this is one that they're funding or they're providing space. It could be a different event. Keep them involved in your organization. And think of this as a two-way street. You're also reaching out and supporting their events as well. So you're participating on both sides of this relationship. And you're looking to develop that deep and committed relationship that will further the cause that you both share. And your donors want to be proud to be affiliated with you. So continue to keep this, that the relationship going. And as I say, use time as your ally. That means that over time, you will have the opportunity to deepen this relationship and find new ways to partner together. It is an ongoing, it is a cycle. So once you have reached stage 6, You're keeping them engaged, you're evaluating what went well, what you can do better next time. So the evaluation piece is here. And then you're continuing the process again and beginning with stage one as you move into your next phase or your next event, your next year, whatever that may be in this case. So, and with that, I will then turn it over to Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy, for your introduction. Or your explanation of the fundraising cycle. Now, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit more about some of the things you've talked about, and also talk about sustaining youth engagement over time. And so when we're fundraising, whether it's ourselves as staff member or the youth that we're working with, one of the questions we need to ask ourselves is, do we need a team to work on this, or is one person enough to work on this? And a team offers more ideas, more energy, and it's fun, generally fun to be working with other people on this. So one of the things we need to consider is whether a fundraising team or one person should create the fundraising initiative to support youth engagement. What types of activities might be needed, and who can do these kind of activities? Are we looking for somebody who can write grant applications, somebody who can speak thoughtfully about our mission and what we're hoping to do with the funds? What kinds of skills or talents might we need? Who has enthusiasm? Who's good at motivating and engaging other people? And especially for youth who may be doing this, have we identified an adult advisor or mentor who can help the youth comply with our coalition or organizational rules? Okay, and preparation. What is our goal for raising funds? Wendy already spoke about this. We need to agree on the what and the why, and we need to be able to articulate it so our potential donors really understand what it is we're trying to do. So exactly what is the prevention initiative that we're fundraising for? Is it an activity, an event, a long-term program? Why is this initiative needed? How will things be different as a result of this initiative that we're doing? Who will benefit? Is it the young people? Is it the young people they're working with? Is it the larger community? What happens if we don't conduct this prevention initiative? That's important too. What will kids miss out on? Or are they not having the opportunity to develop some important skills or leadership? And then do we have data that we can share that shows positive results from similar initiatives, so people understand that there are positive outcomes and what they are? And it could be things we've done in the past, if we've done something similar before, or it may be other groups or a model program that we can share data from. Okay, identify the different kinds of fundraising strategies we can use. They fall under ask, share, earn, or charge. And so asking for funding or resources like food, printing, sharing resources, including facilities, equipment, talents, and time. Earn money by selling a product. The young people may have a great idea for a product that they want to sell. Maybe it's a t-shirt with a catchy phrase, or they want to hold a fundraising event to earn some money. And the last one is charging for a service. Is there something the young people can offer the community to be able to charge for a service? One example is a parents' night out, where young people babysat for parents who were dropping off their kids. They created like this fun night for elementary school age kids, and that way parents could go out and have a night out, not worry about their kids, and kids could have an opportunity to connect and play. The young people charged a service for that. Another example might be yard work in the fall or the spring. And one of the things to think about is this something that's going to be a one-time event, or do you see yourself and the young people doing this over time, like maybe tech skills? Maybe they could help adults with tech. or younger kids with tech skills. Okay, so one of the things you want to do when you're thinking about your fundraising plan is just brainstorm fundraising strategies that could work in your community with your young people. Either things you do on behalf of the young people or things that they're going to do. And we've got a bunch of examples here. So when we're asking for funding or resources, are we asking for donations of money from individuals or organizations, like the local Lions Club or Rotary? Is there another group supporting youth? Writing a grant application, identifying grant-making organizations, and there may be local or community foundations that you could apply to. Local companies sometimes give out money, and local banks is another one. Asking directly for donations of food, printing, materials from local businesses, asking for introductions to other people or groups that may be able to help. The next one is sharing resources, including facilities, equipment, talents, and time. Thinking about what skills or talents you might need to help you with. For example, I would need to ask some people for marketing help because that's not my thing. I'm a word person. I'm a text person. So I would need help with the marketing and the graphic design. Perhaps there's somebody who's a social media influencer in your town, or there's a partner like the library who does a great job with social media, and you could ask them to share information about what you're doing. Thinking about partners you know and you've worked with and feel comfortable with, and think about partners who have similar goals as you, that you're both working for positive youth development, for example. And then the other two are earning money and charging for a service. And we talked about creating or selling a product or creating an entrepreneurial effort. And I mentioned t-shirts. Another one is bracelets, printed. Can you create products that can support the coalition or its initiatives, and things that might appeal to youth and adults? Holding a fundraising event or collaborate with another group to benefit from this. What type of event would appeal to your community, to your families, to your peers? Might it be a like block party that people could pay a ticket for? So that's one example. Maybe it's a gala or a gala event that's held in the evening, in which you invite policymakers and decision makers in your community. And would these events help increase awareness of the coalition and support for its initiatives? So it's a twofer there. The young people are raising money, or you're raising money to go to the young people's work, but you're also raising awareness of the coalition. And then charge for service. What talents exist among the group of young people? So we talked about social media, tech skills, tutoring, babysitting, yard care. And then, as I mentioned earlier, is this going to be a one-time service on a special day, or are you going to offer this over time? And if you want to offer it over time, can you sustain this service over time? And what we have here is just a worksheet where you, as a team with your staff or with the youth that you're working with, can just brainstorm different options under each of the fundraising strategies after you've explained it to them. And then you can list the pros and cons to help you with decision making and think about which one you might select. And there's no rule that says you have to limit it to one. You can do multiple. So maybe you're going to ask a group, a local civic organization, for donations, and you're going to write a grant to your local community foundation. And the kids have decided they want to do, say, a car wash in the spring with a bake sale, something like that. So you've got three things right there that you're thinking about. And then this is an action plan to take that previous worksheet to the next step. What types of activities are needed for your fundraising? Who's the person responsible? What's the time frame? What's the status, and any comments? So for example, if you're writing a grant application to a local funder, one activity would be identify potential funders, in our area. Number two, what's required? Identify what they're looking for. Begin writing those pieces. Give assignments to who's going to be writing what pieces. Create a budget. Determine when the deadline is for submitting these, or is it a rolling deadline? And then follow up with them to see, have they made a decision? Do they need more information? Do they want a presentation? So these are some of the activities that can go into something like writing a grant application to a local funder. Okay, fundraising planning, creating the ask. And Wendy talked about this, writing a few paragraphs that describe who is your youth group or youth coalition, the coalition or group name, their goals, a brief description or history, and what are some past accomplishments? What have they done? We're trying to communicate why this group is a good investment to our funder. Why do you need to fundraise? Why do you need their funds or their time or equipment? How does it fit into the big picture of this particular initiative and the larger work that they're doing? Who will benefit from this? And what happens if we can't do this? And then clearly stating what the ask is. We are asking for a donation of this amount of money to support this particular activity. Can you provide this many pizzas for 2 events that we're having? And the events are, please support our coalition babysitting event so you can enjoy a parents' night out, your kids can have some fun, and we can raise money for our youth council. And then inquire about the next steps. What do they need from you? Offer to meet to introduce the youth team and provide more information. Ask if you can check back by a specific date. And always, if the youth are working with this, having an adult advisor or mentor to review the case statement. Make sure it's clear, make sure it's consistent with the rules and expectations of the organization that you're working for. Okay, and then creating the initiative or an event plan that clearly states what's the time frame, whether we're going to have prep and cleanup time, determine the number of youth and adult volunteers that are necessary to make this happen successfully, who is doing what and when. Really identify all the activities, the person responsible for them, a time frame. Identify adults who will help the day of the event and their responsibilities, and the young people know who they are. Ask the adult advisor for an emergency plan if someone gets hurt. So making sure we have an emergency plan just in case something happens. And then one thing that's super important is determining the rules for handling any money, checks, etc. Ask an adult staff or advisor to accept the money and checks. A youth team member can record contributions for later thank yous, and determine whether thank yous or some kind of other recognition is necessary for donations, whether you want to do it the day of the event, or you write a letter to the editor of the newspaper, or you take out an ad, or you do something over social media, as well as a thank you directed to the donor with a report of what happened. And then determine whether any materials need to be printed for this event or initiative. And then basically work your event or event plan. Check to make sure every person is prepared and present. If they're not, do you need to switch people around? Check if they need anything, help, materials, questions. Have a designated adult for volunteers' questions that they can answer that. Ensure the rules for handling money are followed. Don't forget to recognize any sponsors or donors. Evaluate your event. Have volunteers complete a brief survey about what what went well and what could be improved, or conduct a quick debriefing meeting immediately after the event or the initiative. Recognize people's efforts. You might want to serve food or give a small gift card for people who were able to volunteer and help you. And after the initiative or the event, thank your sponsors and recognize them publicly. And I think this is this where Jessica comes in? I believe.
Sure, I can take this slide.
Okay,
Thanks, Lisa. So
sure.
we wanted to reiterate some best practices to keep in mind when handling funds, especially working with young people. These might be things that you want to really stress to them to ensure that they feel confident and that, you know, everything happens with an integrity-driven intention behind it. So the first step behind that would really be to know the policies of your organization or fiduciary. There's likely systems and procedures already in place. Be sure that everybody who's participating in this is aware of that and that they are prepared to follow and abide by those procedures. Some other things to keep in mind would be to always use the buddy system. So you should really not just have one person who is handling funds, but having at least two people who are engaged and able to support and monitor, which kind of leads into the next suggestion, which is to use a lockbox or have some kind of secure way to be able to store the funds or checks that are coming in at your event, or, you know, whatever way you are fundraising there. And using that buddy system to make sure that it's consistently monitored. So if somebody does need to step away to use the bathroom or whatever the need might be, that there's still somebody there who is watching the space and keeping it secure. The next would be to never use personal accounts, right? So youth or staff should not use their own Venmos or their own bank accounts to be able to accept donations or things that are coming in through your fundraisers. Ensure that there are official systems set up. Maybe you have to create a Venmo that is specific to your youth group or your youth organization or some other kind of electronic money platform that can serve that purpose. But the point is that it shouldn't pass through people's personal accounts on the way to getting to your organization or youth group. And then the last thing would be really stressing to youth that they are not holding on to any funds that come in, that they are turning them into their advisor or whoever that designated person is to then collect, process, and put them deposited into wherever they need to end up so that they can be used for future purposes. So these are sort of just broad suggestions, but definitely some best practices to make sure that you are abiding by and that your youth leaders are also aware of.
Okay, and so one of the things we wanted to talk about was creating and sustaining youth engagement over time. We've talked about fundraising for, say, a youth council or a specific activity they want to do. Maybe you want to send them to CADCA training or GPP's youth leadership training in June. Maybe you want to be able to develop a more sustainable youth group. Take the young people who have been attending your coalition meetings and create a youth council where they can be in charge of some things, some prevention activities that they want to do, or that are in line with your strategic plan. So one of the ways we can think about this is something called gap analysis. And basically what we think about is, where are we right now in terms of our youth engagement, and where do we want to be? Number two, what would we like to see happen? And then number three is taking a look at the gap between 1 and 2. And what do we need to do to make that happen? And we have an example of some things coming up on the next slide, but it's something for you to be thinking about, articulating where you want to be. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, and here's some examples. Where are you now? Maybe you have one youth peer advocate that you have hired. Maybe you're paying them a certain amount by the hour. Maybe you're giving them stipends. Maybe you're not paying them yet, and you'd like to be able to do that. So that may be where you want to be. You want to be able to pay them, or change it from like a stipend to an hourly pay. Or maybe you want to hire a second peer advocate because you've had a good experience with number one. Maybe you have 2 or 3 youth as coalition members, and you'd like to create a separate youth council that's like a subcommittee within your coalition. Maybe you have an active youth council, but there's really no leaders. It's a group of kids, but you're really looking to develop some leaders who can help coordinate, administer the youth council, and provide the opportunity for them to have some youth leadership skills. So looking at the gap between 1 and 2, what do we need to do? Do we need to identify some additional funding for that second youth peer advocate? Do we need to recruit for a second youth peer advocate? In terms of creating the youth council, do we work with those 2 or 3 youth members to create a case for a youth council, including its purpose, goals, recruitment plan, incentive? Do we discuss that, present that to the coalition? Do we present it to our supervisor or our organization that may be sponsoring this? Do we ask the young people to help recruit people that they know? Do we ask adults to help us recruit? And then for the third one, discussing a youth leadership plan with the youth council members, with coalition, collaborate on recruitment and how we prepare these leaders, how we're going to select these leaders. Okay, sustaining youth engagement, preparing and planning. Begin where you are. Think about where you want to be. That's gap analysis. Does your coalition already have some youth members, or a youth council or committee, or youth peer advocates? What roles can the youth fill on your coalition? What are some things you'd like to add where they can provide some meaningful contributions, and they can develop youth development skills as well? Do you need to discuss these changes with your coalition members or leaders or your supervisors? What opportunities does your coalition currently offer youth, and what can you add or expand? And have you asked current youth what they'd like to do? What strengths or talents would they like to contribute? What would they like to learn? What opportunities for preparing youth for these opportunities are available, and what should be added? Who can provide these? Are you going to bring in say an outside consultant who can help you with some of this planning and training, or is this something you can do? Or do you have a staff member, a colleague who can help? Or is there a partner organization that you can ask? And creating an action plan, including recruitment, training, potential prevention projects, timeline, incentives. So thinking out those things, and then thinking about using those 4 strategies. How do we find the funding to do this? Okay. And funding, does your current budget support adding or expanding your youth engagement, or is that not an option? If you look at your current funding, is there funding already allocated for youth engagement? Can you change your current funding? Can you reframe a budget line? Say, for example, maybe you have vaping PSA in there, or vaping awareness activities. Perhaps the youth can do that. And that's a way to find some money within your current budget. Should you consider asking for additional funding for a youth engagement pilot or expanded participation? Whether it's a donation or a grant. Sustaining, what organizational structure should the youth engagement initiative have? Is it going to be a council, a youth council? Is it youth peer advocates? So how is it going to fit in the bigger picture? And how can it be organized so young people understand what it is they're doing and how it's going to work? What options are there for continued funding of youth engagement? Can you amend current funding? Can you seek new funding? Do you have a youth leadership development plan? Do you have a youth leadership succession plan? I know one coalition where it was time to pick a new youth peer advocate, and a sophomore was selected, a high school sophomore. And some of the seniors got their nose out of joint because they thought they should have been selected. But this sophomore has knocked it out of the park, done a phenomenal job, and has really grown. This person is now a senior. And so they lost some of their seniors, but she more than made up for the young people who weren't happy and left by recruiting a whole bunch of new young people. Will the youth be trained to become advocates for the Youth Council? Can they be mentored and coached so they can help with some of these asks that we've talked about? Will they report on their success to the coalition, the community decision makers, the funders, whether it's doing a presentation, whether it's creating an infographic, writing a thank you letter based on what they've done? Those are just some of the ways that they may be able to report on their success, using social media, for example, to report on their success. And just some reminders, the youth you engage are typically minors, meaning that they need parental consent and often have school or extracurricular activities that affect their availability. Good engagement requires competent staff, and staff who's enthusiastic about working with youth. Structured supports, think about this from an organizational perspective, and interested youth. If no young people want to help lead your program, perhaps they'd like to help redesign it or create something new. Ask for their input. Ensure policies and safeguards are in place on the handling of money by staff and or youth. Have a clear fundraising plan and be able to articulate your why. Make sure your participation numbers are supported by sufficient staff, youth leaders, and volunteers for safety and fun. And probably the last thing is make it a fun experience for young people. Alternate work with fun, or try to encourage some fun during the work, so they're enjoying themselves along with doing important work and developing those skills that will be important in the future.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Lisa. I hope that you were all able to learn some great strategies and some approaches to be able to increase the sustainability and the resources that you have to engage in meaningful youth engagement. And we have a colleague of ours, Ben from Clinton, here to share some information about how they approach this. They have had a very successful annual fundraiser that they engage their youth leaders in. So with that, Ben, would you be able to share a little bit about the event that takes place in Clinton, and just give our audience some more information on how you approach this?
Sure. So we have an annual fundraiser where we raise money primarily for social services in Clinton. And we have it's called Haunted Hallways. So we basically turn the high school into a haunted house. Within reason. There's like five hallways typically, so we split them up into groups, and some of our leaders will take ownership of those groups and to figure out the themes. And so what that does is it kicks off like the fall school year with, we typically will get like over 100 kids involved in that, and then we break them up into groups, and then we let them, we're there to just guide. We let them kind of lead the way and figure out what they want to do with it and what they want to do with the themes and the sort of characterization of, all the scares and everything like that. So it gets everybody like super involved. And then what we end up doing is having like planning meetings. We have prep meetings where we get a ton of turnout for those. And really we're there to just guide, like it's been mentioned a few times already. Like one of the things that we really try and do is just like ask them a ton of questions, you know what I mean? And that kind of lays then into like when we go forward with React, which is our youth group, youth coalition, like when we go forward with that, it kind of empowers them to sort of take leadership roles, to take, you know, like actively lead projects, campaigns, and realize that like their voice is the sort of they have the questions that we're trying to answer, you know what I mean? So like if we ask them a bunch of stuff for you know, when it comes to like decisions that they're making, they realize that like we're there to support, you know what I mean? We're not there to like instruct. So it usually brings, you know, a ton of people to the school on the evening of the event, you know, from sort of all over the community, all different ages. We had like I don't know, we had like we recommend anybody, you know, 6 and under, like maybe it's not for them, right? But like most of the time it's really young kids, and it's, you know, there was a few like really old couples and everybody in between. So it was really fun. But then what happens then is it gives it, because it's a known thing in town, it gives momentum to our youth coalition. And then we get, you know, the sort of the recurring involvement, but also it pulls in the people who are new to it because people have done it before. So when it comes to like hallway leaders and sort of that, you know, we have kind of like tiers of people who, you know, there's people who've been super involved in React who then take the lead in hallways, and they'll pull in like 2 or 3 more people to be kind of like on their like leadership team, and then we'll have like 15 to 16, 17 people in each hallway, working on different stuff. So it really just gives a good collaborative vibe to kind of set off the school year. You know, we typically tend to raise like, I mean, this year what we did, like just we had $2,100, I think, from the event. So we just charge $5 a head, and people come in and you get several kids going, you know, I want to go in and I want to go again, I want to go again. So you know, it's kind of a good, so once they've been a couple of times, we'll just say, yeah, go through. But it's nice. It's definitely a good energy booster for the guys at the school, and they realize like the impact of, you know, just their efforts really, like when they get together and they plan something, like people show out. So it's cool. And that kind of sets a nice tone for the year. So
That's really cool. So it sounds like this helps to support sustainable youth engagement in a lot of ways, right? Not only are you raising funds, but also it's generating buzz and excitement among the young people that this is something they want to participate in, right? This is a reason to join React and engage with the club and become members. Right? Can you speak more to how you help to prepare the youth to take on these roles? How are the older youth able to bring on younger people, and what does that process look like?
it's really just the narrative that we kind of go by with the group, because it's always like, you know, we try to say to the older people, or the people who've experienced more within the sort of prevention realm and making decisions in that space, that like it's kind of to no avail if you're not you're bringing up peers, right? That's the whole point, like the connection with your peers. So like if we're bringing up like the freshmen and the sophomores, and they're kind of being like shown the ropes, you know, for lack of a better word. But I think that then brings a sort of a culture that, like, you know, it's not a siloed situation. Like we're very clear about that. It's not like well, this person does this sport, and this person, you know, this person's in band, this person's in theater, this person doesn't really do any extracurricular. Like it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? And the minute like people come through the door to React, they have the sort of the leaders of that youth coalition that are kind of open arms welcoming them, you know. So that's just kind of like a staple that we try to instill, because, you know, we're trying to go beyond just like your immediate group into the community. So that has to be reflected in like the older kids just pulling them up from the, you know, the freshmen and sophomores, and making sure that they understand like, here's the expectations. Like we can have a ton of fun, but like we're here for each other, you know. And that just kind of resonates through the thing. So
Really nice cultural element to that group, right? It probably feels really great to participate and to join into that, and supports the overall work as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think people feel like, you know, there's not like a mold, you know what I mean? There's not like, this is what a React kid looks like. That's what we try and create, because it's like, you know, when you get a group of people, sometimes like anybody that's been involved in sports or a certain activity, like there's a sort of a fitting into something, you know what I mean? And that's not, we try to avoid that completely. So that definitely helps.
Ben, we look at sustainable fundraising. I know that Haunted Hallways has been going on for many years.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how the youth are engaged with developing those partnerships? I know you have many of them within the community that support Haunted Hallways. How are the youth involved with those partnerships and maintaining and growing those partnerships?
Well, what happens normally with anybody that's like has a significant involvement in Haunted Hallways as a youth, they're pulling in adults from the community. So like what they end up happening is like this year we had one of the football coaches was like acting kind of as a liaison / security for the event. You know what I mean? So every time we have things happening that are going to be large scale in the community, like people are going to tell their coaches, their mentors, their teachers. And so we have people from the adult coalition, like the community coalition, who come and they chaperone, they help out. We get the PD involved. We have to get the fire department, obviously, for regs and stuff before the event. So there's kind of like there's various touch points where like word kind of gets around and it becomes more of like, this has been run by the youth, but it's for the community. So it's kind of, that's they do that. You know what I mean? They do that very, very well because they kind of spread the word, they promote the event, and they pull in people that they come into contact with. So it might be somebody to help out with preparations. It might be somebody to help out on the day. Because when we run it, it's like 6:30 to 8:30 at night. But we open the school doors at like 9 o'clock. And we set up. So it's a really long day. It's kind of crazy, but it's just everything gets dumped in the school and we set up. But it's like it's a great opportunity for like I say, people who would maybe not necessarily like work together, to join forces and like do something positive. And then when they see like the little kids getting a kick out of it and the adults getting a kick out of it at the event, it kind of is proof that like this is what happens when people join together. So
am I correct in understanding that the youth are the ones themselves who go out to the police department, to the fire department, and speak to the school administration? So they're also learning those presentation skills, and they're learning how to articulate their why and the importance of this. Is that right in that?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of some things are like per the protocols, and other things are like what they do in the school. So when it comes to like decisions and, even if it's like some conversation with the custodial staff about like what we can and can't do on the walls to put like tarps up and stuff to black out all of the, it's just little things like that. But they do that and they know now, okay, here's the deal. Because I've just gone to the principal who's given me 4 or 5 key points about how we can put our props and decorations up around the school. So, but they're very much like, they have a good relationship over there with the administration. So they can kind of like, there's a sort of a good communication piece, and thankfully, I mean, I'm grateful that we get that support, because I know that's not always as seamless as we want it to be. So like, the fact that we're able to do that in their building and stuff each year is great. But that relationship is maintained by like the kids being good leaders and knowing like the right questions to ask from the administration. So that's definitely a big piece.
Right. Thank you. I know we have a lot of experience here in our audience today too. So I do want to open the floor for any others who wish to share a success story or have any questions about the materials that we've covered. Are there any challenges that you're currently facing that we might be able to brainstorm together here on? So I do want to open the floor for you for any of that further discussion at this point.
While people are thinking of questions or ideas, I want to make the point that not only are we trying to sustain youth engagement for this group of youth and the next group of youth that come of age, but we also need to think about how to sustain ourselves in this work. And one of the things that I cannot emphasize enough is networking with other prevention folks or other youth development people and learning about what they're doing and maybe collaborating on projects together. I know like the Shoreline in the past has done this regional youth conference at the end of summer that was really well received, and youth were involved in that. many, many years ago, the young people I was working with wanted a youth summit where youth could talk about some of the risk factors for substance misuse and what they needed. And so we collaborated with two other nonprofits who had strong youth programs. We brought them together. We trained them to facilitate the discussions themselves. And then we're standing in the back in case they needed help. And then they debriefed these discussions, the youth who were trained, and then we hired one of the youth over the summer to summarize all the flip chart, because we were using flip chart paper back then, all the flip chart, and come up with a summary and then shared it. So one of the ways we were able to do that was by connecting with two other nonprofits who had youth. And that way we could do like a statewide youth summit instead of a small. So just another idea, thinking about how we can sustain our own selves in this work. And then I'll stop. So if people have questions or successes or challenges. I know, Terry, one of the things you did that I thought was so neat was when you were in Danbury, working as a coalition coordinator there, you were able to bring students from 3 different high schools together, and get them to collaborate on some prevention projects so there would be consistent messaging among the 3 high schools. I don't know if you wanted to say a little about that. I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, that's okay. Yeah, we had 3 different high schools in our area. Actually 4. The 4th was a little more challenging to get involved. But the 3, I had met with the principals. I had, developed a relationship with them over the years. And they kind of helped to pinpoint someone within the school that could be my contact. And so I built a relationship with them. And then together we started a youth advisory council that consisted of students from each of these high schools. And we would meet once a month together. And then they would meet regularly with their contact person in the high school, usually a counselor. And we would decide as a group in our monthly meeting what direction they wanted to go. And then they would take that information to their respective high schools and implement. But there was then, a little bit of consistency anyway. They had their own flair and their own, did their own thing, so to speak. But it was really effective.
Thank you. One of the things I found is when we're bringing young people together from different schools or different communities, different parts of the state, is young people almost always like that. They like hearing from their peers. They like asking questions. Are you guys dealing with the same things that we're dealing with? And so they find that very energizing.
Yeah.
And motivating to be able to connect with others.
Well, and these were 3 completely different high schools. One
Yes.
was our public high school of over 3,000 kids. One was a technical school. So they brought totally different perspectives and expertise. And then one was an alternative school. And they brought totally different perspectives. And it was really fun to see the kids interact and build camaraderie.
Yep. And if you have a VOTEC school, technical school in your area, consider reaching out and connecting with them. I have yet to find a technical school that isn't interested in prevention and expanding their services. I've done staff training in several of them, and they are open and want to support. They're open to partners and want to support their kids. So if you have one, definitely consider reaching out to the technical schools.
The other advantage with the technical schools is they have so many specific departments. So we built a relationship with the graphic and design department, and they did so many of our graphics for different things. And that got the kids involved too. And sometimes there were kids, students that were a part of our advisory council in the graphics department. So it just, kind of all fit together. And they gave us a far better price than we could have gotten anywhere else. And we were supporting a local school.
And that too goes back to the relationship and building the relationship and finding ways that you can help support one another. And that's always, a great approach to take, is finding those commonalities.
If I may too, I just want to add something about what Terry said earlier was that, what we found with our youth is whenever they, we talk about all the time about having the youth voice, right? But like when we ask the youth to voice what they have to say, a lot of kids are very, very they're very willing to share. But there are going to be young people who are saying, okay, how do we share? Like, what is the value in this? And anytime they collaborate with other youth, it really validates how powerful their voice is. Because if people are going through different challenges, similar challenges, how they sort of how they relate, people are, we had the opportunity to go to youth in Ohio, for example, during the summer, and people from all over the country having similar concerns to the youth in Clinton. Now they come back to Clinton and it empowers them more, because now they're feeling like what I have to say is it's felt by a lot of kids. So this is real, when it gives them that scale, that sense of scale of how much they have to say is valued, is needed, is completely necessary for us to do the work. So it kind of validates it in a way that maybe you'd struggle to get that in a smaller group, in a small town. It's a good thing.
I think that's it. Unless anybody else has any other stories to share, we've heard about some great success stories. If anyone would like to ask any questions about challenges or obstacles or barriers you might be facing, that sometimes comes up, as we mentioned, sometimes schedules, transportation. So I would add on top of this presentation is thinking about any obstacles or barriers that might keep kids from being able to attend either your coalition or creating a coalition, or the events that you might be hosting too, and always trying to keep equity in our mind and different populations and what we might need to support the engagement so that all kids can participate. But Wendy or Jessica, do you have anything else before I throw up our contacts and evaluation and all of that?
Nope.
Just a great big thank you to all. I really appreciate your participation and questions that have come up. And I know Jen will be sharing our contact information. And please, as you move forward in your cycle, as you're planning your fundraising, your youth engagement, should questions arise, we will continue to be here to help support you in your coalition. So know that we're here. And if you do have youth that are not yet engaged in the Youth Advisory Board, I also encourage you to look at that. And I would love to meet your rock stars and have them join us to share their voice from your community in our Youth Advisory Board.
All right, so what I'm going to stop recording now.